Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So today I wanted to discuss a little bit of history. Nowadays there's a lot of people who are interested in going to Brazil as a way of connecting with the African diaspora. It's been almost 24 years. Well, actually about 24 years now, seeing that, my first trip to Salvador, Bahia in Brazil's Northeast was in September of what, 2000. So it's been 24 years since my first experiences with Brazil, or actually having been in the country. And for a lot of people, particularly, African Americans or even people coming from the African continent or other countries that have large Black populations, Salvador Bahia is one of those places where everybody says you have to go visit this place, particularly if you have interest in Black African history. And that's what led me to pick Salvador as the first city I wanted to visit when I visited Brazil. It's just like it's a mystical type of city. It has a lot of for those of us who are from the U.S. South, it will bring back certain memories that you have connecting with your people in the South of the country. That's definitely what I felt. The people that I met there, it was just a very memorable experience. Some of the tourist spots that I would hit definitely is a place that you need to visit. One of those places, one of the 500 places you need to visit before you die. Salvador Bahia I've always said it is the center of African culture in Brazil. If you're into Black cultural events, you definitely want to go there. So right now, I want to just talk a little bit about, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with this. I'm quite sure if you venture to Salvador Bahia, you probably already know this. But for those of you who have not, visit the city, just understand whenever you go into a city it has a colonial history, you're going to run into these facts, right? So today, the Pelourinho area of Salvador Bahia is a tourist attraction, but it was also a place of whipping and torture of slaves in Brazil's slavery period. I'm going to just go through a little bit about that because this is something, this is the history. Wherever you go in the world, that place is going to have a history, if it goes back 2, 3, 4, 500 years, and there's going to be some things that's great. There's going to be some things that you may not really care for. And this is just one of those facts that you have to know about Salvador Bahia because it is a hot tourist spot. A lot of people like going there. So I want to get directly into some of the information for today. So definitely like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, click on the notification bell. With that said, let's get into a little bit about this history of Salvador Bahia and particularly the Pelourinho district in the city. So, this is a very, this image right here is an image that you'll see a lot of people who visited Salvador Bahia. You'll see this picture is taken from, one of the angles of the Pelourinho district. Again, it takes me back to my first trip to Salvador Bahia. I remember when I first landed there, when I first got off the plane, and I was just, I took a taxi cab first thing I needed to do was to exchange my money, find some place to stay. And, a taxi took me to the Pelourinho district. I had no idea. I had done a lot of research as I started studying about Brazil. I would say December 24th, 1999. That's when I always say I bought this Africana encyclopedia, the Encyclopedia of the African and African American Experience. And I just, I immersed myself in learning about Brazil. So I was familiar with Pelourinho. I was familiar with the food and the music, but there's still things that I wasn't familiar with. So when I first hit the Pelourinho, it's one of those areas. I mean, Salvador, in some ways, it reminds me of somewhere in Georgia. It reminds me a little bit of Baltimore. It's a port city. Salvador was the first capital of Brazil for a few hundred years. But as much as research as I had done, I hadn't come across this information. I had met this white couple from Boston who were in Salvador at the same time as myself. I met them through a mutual friend. And, I remember we were sitting at a bar and we were all just sitting around talking. And she was like, well, Mark, the Pelourinho actually means whipping post. This is what this woman is telling me. She says, this is where slave masters would publicly, torture and whip slaves in front of the whole public, as a way of, so that slaves who were considering, being disobedient or escaping, if they were publicly flogged, this would send a message out to those who had ideas of doing the same thing. And it was it was kind of shocking to hear that. Um, so when you visit Pelourinho years later, Pelourinho, I think they started trying to revitalize the Pelourinho. I'm trying to say, I know it's not coming out right now. Um, they came up with the idea, says this will be an incredible tourist spot, and that's what it's turned out to be. Anybody who travels to Salvador Bahia, they're definitely going to go to the Pelourinho district. It's just like this is so vibrant. There's so many cultural attractions going on down in that area, but this is that sordid history that just reminds you how much Brazil was based on a slave society, right? It's a sad reminder of Brazil's history and the racial hierarchy today. And the reason why I say that is that in everyday discourse, in jokes, in television novellas, the slave history is still embedded in the minds of Brazilians who live today. It's almost like, always throwing something back into the slavery era, it kind of keeps people in a racial hierarchy that says, well, you guys were slaves, you know, and people carry that to this day. It's like a constant reminder. I'm like, why does it seem like Brazil still seems to have some type of just collective obsession with the slavery era? This was a time when Black people did all the work. Black people were punished. Black people were treated as less than human. They were bought and enslaved. And, I mean, we know the history. A lot of us know it from the United States perspective, but let us understand that Brazil imported the most slaves out of any American country. You know what I mean? North, South, and Central America and the Caribbean. Brazil brought in way more slaves than any other country. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But Pelourinho, let's learn about the history of this symbol of Salvador Bahia. This first article is from Lucas Haganyan, and he writes that it's a World Heritage Site. The Pelourinho is a must-see destination for anyone visiting the capital of Bahia. Its colorful, historic architecture and abundant culture are some of the things that most attract the attention of those who visit Pelourinho. But did you know that this important tourist spot in Salvador has a history that is intertwined with that of Brazil? What is Pelourinho, the sad origin of its name? Pelourinho was the place where slaves who ran away or committed some kind of crime were taken for punishment. Made up of a stone column with rings, the Pelourinhos, or pillories, were placed in public areas where people were tied up and cruelly tortured. I was this painting here always caught my attention because you see a black man whipping another black man. I think and it's like the overseer. The black man whipping another black man, serving the interests of the slave master, people standing around, a public flogging, humiliation. Salvador, now the capital of Bahia, was the capital of Brazil for 214 years between 1549 and 1763. At the time, slave labor was used abundantly in the region, and for this reason, the dreaded Pelourinhos, again meaning pillories, were set up around the city as a representation of justice and the authority of the slave holders. Some of the spaces that received the pillories were Terreiro de Jesus, Praça Castro Alves, and Praça Tomé de Souza, rather. Another modern day picture depicting the Pelourinho district. Pelourinho is history, art, and culture, a place that was home to such a sad history. Salvador's Pelourinho is now synonymous with a lot of Bahian music, culture, and art. Recognized as a World Heritage Site, visitors can see churches with striking architecture such as the Basilica Cathedral and the Rosario dos Homens Pretos Church, the Rosary of the Black Men's Church, which you can translate that. The George Amado Foundation, of course, George Amado being a world-renowned author from Brazil whose works has been translated into several languages, as well as restaurants, bars, cultural center, artistic attractions, museums, and much more. Located in the historic downtown of Salvador Bahia, Pelourinho is known worldwide for having served as a stage for international artists such as Michael Jackson and Paul Simon. A lot of us are familiar. Michael Jackson performed and recorded a video for his song "They Don't Care About Us," partly in Rio and partly in Salvador, in the Pelourinho district, with, I believe, drummers from the Olodum cultural group. Another old, classic painting depiction of a Pelourinho. So let's talk about Pelourinho and the slavery in Rio Grande do Norte. It's another state in Brazil. This piece is by Gustavo Sobral and André Felipe Pignotaro. The Historic Institute of Geography of Rio Grande do Norte museum houses some pieces that mark, lest we forget, the nefarious period of slavery in the state of Rio Grande do Norte, a long and degrading period in Brazil's colonial and imperial history. Historians point out that the first enslaved Africans in the state of Rio Grande do Norte came from the state of Pernambuco for forced labor in the sugar mills and to serve in livestock and cotton plantations in the hinterland. In the second half of the 19th century, they were also brought from Maranhão State, another state in Brazil's northeast that has a large Black population, disembarking at the ports of Areia Branca e Macão for forced labor in the salt pans of the north coast. Another image here. We see, we can say it's probably like a statue that's connected to what would be a pillory here. That's what a common sight that would have happened during the slavery era, a person being tied to what they call the tronco and being whipped publicly. On the Institute's balcony, the Pelourinho of the city of Natal is one of the landmarks of the violence of slavery. A stone column from the time of colonial Brazil. It was used for punishment, also called picota. It served for other uses. Official notices and proclamations were posted on it to be read in between floggings of the condemned, hangings and displays of the heads of the executed. The Pelourinho was up to 4 meters high, and on it were rings for ill treatment and hooks for hanging beheaded heads. All right. I mean, it's a gruesome history. Somebody who did a video called, it says right here, Brazil was horrible. I also want to point out, well, let me just go on with the next paragraph because I'm gonna talk about this too. The pillory was just one of the many tools used not only to imprison and subjugate the enslaved, but also to punish and humiliate them. Blacksmiths made chains and other instruments for subjugation and mistreatment. The whip was the basic instrument of oppression. Chains, garlands, gotilhas were put on the neck, handcuffs, maces, and stockings on the feet and hands, and the vida mundo for the feet and arms. So each one of these pieces had its own name. So that's something else that needs to be talked about, because when you go into these museums, or you could just look at this online, you'll find all of these instruments that were used during slavery. Some of the instruments that I was just mentioning that would, tie together people's hands and feet, handcuffs, chains on the feet and the wrists. They would have the iron mask over somebody's face. Just thinking about slavery from today's era is, you just wonder, how would you have survived in the era of slavery, knowing the type of torture that people were subjected to? When you look at that, and some museums, you can actually just look and be like, wow, they used this on real people. And then you see the artistic paintings of people being whipped until, blood is starting to sprout out of somebody's back. I'm just wondering, what goes through your mind when you think about this? So when you visit Salvador, Bahia, and you go to the Pelourinho district, this is something that you should think about. You're walking on the cobblestone ground, and it's like, slaves, Black slaves were tortured and humiliated in this area, in this public square. It's just something to think about, as today the Pelourinho district is a place of tourism. It's a tourist attraction. But beneath that, there's a lot of historic stuff you can find in Salvador. I remember a few areas I went to, there were dungeons under the ground where you could go and you would find where this is where they would hold slaves until they were sold. There's places that house, corpses. It's, it really does something to your mind when you go and see this type of stuff. And it just makes me wonder, psychologically, how do people think about that today, that they can make jokes about it? There's things all over Brazil that still in 2024 are just reminders of the slavery period. And I just look, that's how Brazilian society has been put in a hierarchy where, how do Black people feel these days when they see these types of things? And there are people who still make jokes. I've seen, there's articles all over blackbraziltoday.com where you have white men who will walk up to Black women and be like, if we were back in slavery right now, you know what I would be doing with you? And just jokes, So this is something I just wanted to bring to the forefront because, the Pelourinho is a historic district. It is great for tourism, but Let's remember what was going on there about 300 years ago, 200 years ago. In addition to these, there was the Flanders mask and iron rings called anginhos to compress the thumbs, the instruments of beatings and floggings, which were the truncheon and whips. And for other punishments, palmatorias, what they use to beat somebody's hand, to whip somebody's hand. Hot irons marked an F on slaves who were called fujões or runaways, fugitives. Wrists were bound with handcuffs and ankles were bound. At the Institute, again, in Rio Grande do Norte, there are some of these pieces that record the inglorious times of the violence of slavery. Still today, there are places around Brazil where you can still see some of these Pelourinhos. Pelourinho in Paraná State, which is in the south. Pelourinho in São Luís in northeast Brazil, in Maranhão State, the Pelourinho of Mariana in Minas Gerais State. It was rebuilt in 1970. The Albidos Pelourinho in the state of Pará, which is in the north, located in the city's central square. The Pelourinho of Rio Grande in Rio Grande do Sul in the south, which is located in the historic center of the city where the fish market is today, although it was usually improvised on a tree or a ship's mast in the sea. The Pelourinho of the São Mateus in Espírito Santo State, which is in southeast Brazil, located in the Old Port. Sorocaba Pelourinho, installed in 1599 near the Morro de Ipanema, where Alfonso Sarginho had found iron ore. It was moved in 1611 to its current location in Vila de São Felipe in the Embrolho of Sorocaba, which is a city in Sao Paulo State. Pelourinho of Campos dos Goitacazes, located in Rio de Janeiro State in the downtown region. So a lot of history there. It's a sad history. It's a brutal history, but I think this is some history that you should know if you should ever go to the Pelourinho in Salvador, Bahia, because this was the scene that you would see there, right? So I want to put this also into some more historical context. And this is why I say, still today, Brazil seems to have an obsession with making novellas, soap operas that are based in the slave period. I don't understand what that's all about. It's almost like, to me, psychologically, they want to keep one race over the other race. And by continuously, there's been just numerous novellas based in Brazil's slave era that you see public flogging of Black people, in these novellas. I often wonder what the actors, Black and white, think when they're recording scenes where a Black person is being whipped and a white person has the whip in their hand. I just, in terms of the actors, I just wonder what they're thinking when they record these types of scenes. So again, what I'm saying is you still see the remnants of slavery in some of the things that people will say. In 2017, I put this story up. It says this Black woman was beat in a public. She was assaulted by this white man in a pub. And he says to her, "Go back to the slave quarters, monkey, and straighten that hair." Black woman punched and dragged by her hair in a pub. The aggressor pays a fine and walks. So that's what I'm saying. In Brazil, people still have this type of memory about what slavery was like. And there's clearly the victors and the losers. In 2016, I did a story about a woman. She turned her residence. I guess this was a residence that was passed down from her family. And it was a throwback to the slavery era in the city of Vassouras. A descendant of plantation owner dresses as a mistress and employees as slaves to greet and serve tourists, right? So she came up with the brilliant idea to dress up these Black women as like basically slave women. And she, the place is known as an old plantation, so she's got Black women serving a tourist. This is an old picture, probably back from the 19th century or so. And this woman wanted to, let me see, Vassouras is located in the state of Rio de Janeiro. And this is how she had Black women, on the tour of a plantation. Tourists are greeted and served by Black women dressed as slaves. So this is the woman here. She's the IRS of the Fazenda Santa Eufácia. So she's dressing up as a senhora. Basically, the senhora is the master's wife. And she had the brilliant idea of showing off this location that's passed down from her family and to attract tourists by throwing it back to the slave era. That's what I say. Black children dressed as slaves on Independence Day civic parade in Paraná State in southern Brazil. This is from 2022. So they've got, children with, chains on their ankles and feet. depicting them as slaves on the Brazil's Independence Day. Now, so Independence Day just passed. It was September 7th every year. So this is what I'm saying about Brazil having a sort of nostalgia for the slave era, right? Slavery, it's been recognized as 5 million Africans were enslaved, brought across the Atlantic Ocean to serve as slaves in Brazil. So again, I always say, between 10 and 12, maybe 14 times more enslaved Africans were brought to Brazil in comparison to the United States. So Brazil has a huge history in terms of the enslavement of African people. 2018, I didn't mean to offend anyone. In the city of Natal, a mother dresses her 9-year-old son up as a slave with body makeup, chains, and a substance used to imitate whip scars. I mean, look at this. I didn't mean to offend anybody, but yet she dressed her son up. He's got brown body makeup on. He's got chains on. And then she used some other type of liquid or fluid or some type of art. I don't know, something artistic to create the image of scars on the body. But yet she says, I didn't mean to offend anybody. So she dressed him up literally like in blackface. And so this is a woman. She thought it was a good idea to dress her child up as a slave for Halloween. So this is what I'm saying, how slavery is seen in Brazil. This is a carnival procession. I forget what year this is from. This is from 2018. One of the samba schools dressed up some of their participants as slaves. They were reenacting, slavery during their procession. I believe it was the Paraíso Tuiuti. I believe they won in Rio de Janeiro or Sao Paulo's Carnival that particular year. Yeah, I mean, slavery is still very much abundant, takes up a lot of space in the mind of a lot of Brazilians. Look at this. A few hours of pleasure. Motel Senzala. Now, Senzala in Portuguese and English, it means slave quarters. So the slave quarters motel in Porto Alegre in Brazil's southern region offers slavery-themed rooms complete with chains, shackles, and cages. So imagine this. You can go in there and you've got changes, you've got chains, you've got a cage, you probably got whips in there, torture instruments. It's like, who came up with the idea? This is what I'm saying. This is not to say that everybody thinks this way, but it's just psychologically, a lot of people, because of the history of slavery, people still have this nostalgic feeling about slavery. There was an article that I did that Brazilians still have a certain nostalgia about the slavery era, which is coming out in some of these public displays. In 2019, this young black kid, I think he stole some chocolates or something, and the 2 security guards took him into the back room, stripped him naked, and just whipped him like he was a slave, right? I mean, it was shocking when this report came out. It's like, the images are blacked out, they're blurred, but I'm saying that's what was going on here. So this is what I'm saying. Slavery still has something in the mind in Brazil, 350 years of slavery, and it still reverberates in the consciousness of the country today. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about in terms of the Pelourinho district in Salvador, Bahia today. The Pelourinho, it means whipping post. So when you walk through the Pelourinho in Brazil, in Salvador, Bahia, just remember this. Maybe it's a good tourist spot now, but 200-300 years ago, it had a whole different image. So anyway, I'm going to end this video here. What did you think about today's video? Drop a comment in the comment section, like this video, share this video, consider subscribing to the channel. Click on the notification bell so you'll get another video. You'll be alerted when I put up a new video. And with that said, I'm going to end this video here today and request that you all come back. Check out the next video that I post at Black Brazil Today.